Hello once again, listeners, and welcome back to Mid-Table Crisis with me, Simon Cross.
And me, Tom Patrick. How are you doing, Simon?
I'm doing not too bad, but more importantly, Tom, I think we and the Mid-Table Crisis community are going to take this opportunity to formally congratulate you on your engagement.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Some of you may know, some of you may not, but I am now engaged to the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in the world. Her name is Courtney Rachel, and she lives in America. My time over there was a lot of fun, and now I'm back, and how could I be happier than when I'm talking to Simon Cross and recording another Mid-Table Crisis?
Exactly. He's gone from his future wife back to his work wife. And really, isn't that the balance we're all kind of portraying in life? But anyway, before this ends in a somewhat acrimonious divorce.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll get the kids. I suppose we should really get back to the football issues, because Tom's absence across the pond, in conjunction with me changing my role in my job, means we've put Mid-Table Crosses on the back burner, which we don't mean to be neglectful, but we have been, so we're righting that wrong today with a fresh dose of liquid football in your ears, just dripping around the Lowball region. So, Tom, what have we got in store for our listeners today?
Hopefully nothing like what you've been saying, because it seems like you've been smoking crack for breakfast. But we're basically going to be looking at some of the pressing issues that are going on at the moment. I mean, obviously, the African Cup of Nations is moving along nicely. That's been a lot of fun. We're looking at some of the things that have been going on in the Premier League, some players who have been playing very well, but being very naughty. And of course, we're going to be having a bit of a look at the forgotten footballers of the past and where they are now. So, we've got a lot to talk about. But before we launch into it, I've just got to say goodbye and good luck to one of our biggest fans, a long-time listener, Mr. Tom Unwin, who leaves the cosy confines of Venice Media to go work doing something obscure and deranged for a nearby energy company. So, Mr. Tom Unwin, goodbye and good luck. But please still listen to your favourite podcast, Mid-Table Crisis.
And if any other listeners want their own personalised shout out, just let us know via the usual mediums, and we'll endeavour to get you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. P.S. Any sponsorship deals go directly through me, and we're proud to announce this month's sponsorship deals. For January, we're being sponsored by Fist the Homeless, which is a great Birmingham-run local initiative, which is also rolling out in Leicester, which means me and Simon can both get involved. And basically, you drag a homeless person off the street and fist them until they are no longer homeless. This can take 7 to 8 days. So that's something we're both very much behind. But go on, Simon. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, I think we should start with, obviously, the biggest tournament ongoing at the moment, the African Cup of Nations. Have you been catching much of the action at all?
What's the African Cup of Nations, Simon? No, I have. I've been keeping my eye on it. The African Cup of Nations is always a fun one because there's always those teams that you don't really hear that much about. You know, obviously, when it comes to the World Cup, you know, certain teams are usually involved. You know, you've got your Cameroons and your Nigerias and your Egypt and your Algeria. Algeria twice. But I mean, there's those kind of teams. And then there's a few you haven't seen before, or maybe don't know too much about. Congo are playing the Democratic Republic of Congo at the moment, so that's going to be a great matchup. And of course, Guinea and Mali and some of the smaller nations, it's good to see them involved. But it was the two aforementioned teams that caused a bit of a stir at the ACN, wasn't it? For the way they qualified. Simon can take you through it.
It's a really strange one. Basically, for those who don't know, which I can't imagine are many by now, in Group D of the African Cup of Nations, which Ivory Coast won, So they qualified no trouble at all. But Mali and Guinea, out of the 3 games they played, they drew each of them 1-1. So they had identical records. Now, because there was no way to tell them apart in goal difference or goals scored or head-to-head or anything like that, the African Cup of Nations committee decided they used the somewhat outdated and antiquated method of drawing lots to decide which team went through to the next round, which, I don't know about you, Tom, but just seems to me to be very... It's a hell of a cop-out. It's a hell of a way around it. Surely we should have something better in place by now.
So what you're saying, Simon, is that because there were so many draws that they had to use this method. So would you say that they were drawing lots because they were drawing lots?
That was terrible. I mean, obviously the fact that they drew all 3 of their games. I mean, the fact remains is to be knocked out of the competition and not lose a game. It's got to hurt a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like Mali got taken out. Obviously, they lost the draw, and Guinea went through. They're going to take on Ghana. So it's really, I mean, both coaches before the draw said it was completely unfair. Like that, for both people. Like, whoever wins is still an unfair result. And I'm inclined to agree with them. Seeing some social media, like the BBC Sports guys, they had a thing on their sports day, their live sports day feed about possible alternatives. And some of those were weird, but some of those were really good. Like,
can you remember it?
Yeah, there was like the ice hockey style penalty shootout where you dribble from the halfway line before taking a shot. That's a novelty that a lot of people seem to like rear its ugly head every now and again. What I did like was the prospect of a 30-minute match, just play a period of extra time between the 2 of them, and if there's no result then, just a penalty shootout. Like a 30-minute mini-match. That was an interesting concept, because another full-length match would be unfair on whoever won anyway, because then they're tied for the quarter-final. So, I don't think a full-length match would have ever been the answer. I like the idea of the 30-minute mini-match. Or a 5-a-side match. That was a personal one of mine. I like that one a lot. Just get them to pick their 4 best outfield players and a goalkeeper, and just have 30 minutes 5-a-side, see who wins.
That would be quite fun, but it would also be quite crazy. So
and televise it, obviously. Like the fact that the draw, at least as far as I was aware, didn't have much exposure in Europe. Mind you, the Africa Cup of Nations doesn't really. It should, like, more. But the whole thing just seemed a bit weird, especially because the 2 teams hung out together before the draw as well. So you're with your rivals, and one of you is going to go like, "Yeah, we're through," and the other ones are like, "Oh." And even though both of you have already said it's unfair, and you would have said that whether you'd won or lost, if you've won, you're still going to feel happy about it. So it's going to colour the way you respond to the other team. So watching it together, for me, it would have been too weird for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the weird part of that group is the fact that Cameroon were 4th as well. That was a shocker.
I think that was the only. There was it all 1-1 draws apart from a 1-0 win. Like not just for Mali and Guinea, but every single game finished 1-1 apart from 1-0 win, and obviously Cameroon lost 1-0, so they're out.
Yes, because Ivory Coast have a +1 goal difference and Cameroon have a -1 goal difference, and Ivory Coast have scored 3 goals and conceded 2, and it's the inverse for Cameroon. So yeah, you're right. It's just, I mean, if it had all been draws, it'd have been absolutely mental how they would have had to have solved it.
God knows. I mean, yeah, bizarre. What I did remember seeing though was the during the Ivory Coast Guinea game, I think was it Gervinho got sent off. The fact that Guinea failed to capitalise on that. I mean, obviously a draw is a good result for them because the Ivory Coast are one of the biggest teams when it comes to the African Cup of Nations. But I thought they maybe could have capitalised on that and made sure got through. But obviously it wasn't to be. But they still made it through. So well done to them. Well done to them indeed. Because it's tough, but as you say, I'd rather go through unfairly than not go through
it. I mean, we've had the drawing of lots before, like to solve things, but the last incident, the first incident I can think, well, I can't think of any other incident myself, like in terms of living memory, but the last one was internationally, it was 1990, at the World Cup when Holland and Ireland tied for second place in their group. Sepp Blatter conducted the drawing of lots ceremony live on television. So both teams were going to go through, but this was to determine the rankings, so who got a first seed, who got a second seed. Mm-hmm. So that's not as bad, but it's unfeasible for the African Cup of Nations, perhaps.
Yeah.
And it's African Cup in 1988, Algeria knocked out Ivory Coast through this method. So it's happened. Well, it's happened twice before, but what would you have as an alternative, Tom? I've put forward the five-a-side concept because I think that'd be a hell of entertainment and a semi-fair way of getting an outcome, but not jeopardising the health of too many of the players. So, what options would you have? What would you go for?
No, I do agree with you because the obvious option would be to just have a playoff game, but you don't, with the amount of games that are being played, and if you go through to knockout football next, you don't really want to play a playoff game, a tough game. Even if you get through, that probably means you're going to go out in the next round. So that would be tough. So yeah, the 30-minute game was fun, and probably the best idea. Obviously alphabetical order would be stupid. I've seen leagues, competitions decided on that before. Or, the only other option would be to go down to it even further, and look at certain stats, like attacking play, like how many shots they registered. That's been used to determine things before. So, that's, what's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if if that happens in the future in similar situations.
But then do you if people go in knowing that for the final game it'll come down to shots, do you not jeopardise the defensive side of the game entirely and ruin the purism of football? It's a hard debate to have. Definitely,
but would you not say that drawing lots ruins the purism of football, making it just about who gets lucky?
Oh no, completely. But as this is the trouble. I think ultimately this is why they're still down to drawing of lots, because it's the most convenient of a terrible outcome, a terrible choice. Basically, it's just A, it's the easiest one logistically to do, and B,
it's the lesser of two evils, really.
Yeah, well, it's the lesser of several evils, I'd say, essentially. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, Guinea are through. If they win the tournament now, does it feel tainted? Would they obviously celebrate it, but would history look on it kindly?
Well, the thing is, Guinea aren't actually that big of a team. Obviously we've seen smaller nations win it before, Zambia being the best example. But if Guinea do win it, I think it's going to be more of a. Obviously, people can talk about the fact that they got through like this, but no, you can't say they necessarily didn't deserve to go through, because 3 draws. They didn't lose a game, so they'd be unlucky to go out, just as Mali were very unlucky to go out. But I think if Guinea win it, people would be talking more about the fact that Guinea, such a small nation, have managed to win it rather than anything else. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the fact they're going to get, if they do it via drawing lots would be part of the story. But
you're right, and I think you're right. It would be a grand achievement, and that should be the story. However, I I just think people are a bit more cynical than that. And history, just through no fault of Guinea's own, if they did do it, they'd be looked on unkindly for it.
Very, very likely, Anthony. But, yeah. I mean, the thing is as well about this African Cup of Nations, there was actually quite a few big teams that didn't make it. Nigeria aren't there, which is, very, very rare because usually they're one of the first ones in there. They're very, one of the best teams in Africa and have been for years. So it's been a strange one, and some of the smaller teams are finally, breaking through, and Ivory Coast may actually win something because after all the years of them being, nearly men. So,
well, their only real competition, I would say, in terms of historically good teams, is Ghana, because
Cameroon as well. Cameroon were good in the 90s, but I know what you mean.
Well, Cameroon got knocked out. They were fourth, so they're out in the group stage. As well as South Africa, who only scored 1 point in the competition, but you could argue their group. I mean, Group C of this tournament was a group of death if ever I saw one. Yeah. Ghana, Algeria, Senegal, and South Africa. Mm-hmm. Any one of those teams, you could argue, had the potential to win the competition.
Yeah, all played at the World Cup, which not all African nations can say. That was a really tough group. But I mean, I'll tell you what, South Africa aren't that good these days. When you and me were a bit younger, they had some very good players. But these days, not quite so good. I mean, they wouldn't have been in the 2010 World Cup if we weren't hosting it, put it that way.
They were unfortunate to get the group they got in the World Cup, and the fact that they are the first hosts to ever get knocked out, that's got to, in the group stage, that's got to hurt a little bit. I mean, to be honest, it could happen in about 6 years' time? 7 years' time? No. Well, my maths is terrible.
Qatar.
Qatar. You know which one I'm on about, Qatar.
Yeah, they're not going to make it through. I'd be very surprised if they do, to be honest, because they are a fairly poor team at the moment. They've got a few good players, but if you look at their league, the Qatar Stars League, it's just full of Brazilians and aging European stars looking for a final payday. And so there's not really much, there's not much clamour for Qatari players. Young Qatari footballers don't really have many idols to look up to. And obviously, football does go on in Arabia, but honestly, places like Oman and obviously Saudi Arabia and Iran, they have much more football activity than Qatar. Obviously, it's a small country, but I mean, Qatar, honestly, unless they make vast improvements over the next 6 or 7 years, they are going to be out possibly without even scoring a goal. I wouldn't be surprised, depending on who they come up against. They could take a real thrashing.
Oh yeah, it could be really embarrassing for them, no doubt.
I mean, what I was going to say as well is also Egypt aren't involved, and I think Egypt have won the most African Cup of Nations. It's either Egypt or Algeria, and it's quite often Egypt and Algeria making it through to the last few rounds. So, the fact that Egypt and Nigeria aren't there, I mean, that is huge, and two of the biggest teams in the whole continent. So, it's going to be really interesting to see now that it's down to the last 8.
Oh yeah, it's. I'm personally backing Ghana. I think they're the heavy favourites here on in. They've got the experience, they've got the players. They've done it before. I reckon they'll do it again.
I think Ivory Coast, surely they've got to win something. I mean, the term golden generation has been used about them. I don't know if that's particularly accurate. Obviously they had a good group of players, but I think golden generation's the wrong term to use. But, I think they should have enough to do well. I mean, Equatorial Guinea obviously is based in Equatorial Guinea, so they're going to have a chance, but I don't think they're really going to have the legs to get them through. Same with both Congos, both decent teams, but probably not on the same level. Tunisia could cause a few upsets. I know they've got a few Brazilians in the team, but I don't think they're going to make it to the final. So if I had a pick, I'd probably say Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Algeria, and Ghana to make up 3 of the 4 semi-finalists.
Okay. That's going to be an interesting one. I'd say Ivory Coast, Ghana, Algeria, and Tunisia. So.
Oh, I mean, sorry. Ivory Coast are playing Algeria, so only one of them can go through. I mean, Ghana have got Guinea. You'd expect Ghana to be winning that one, really, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
so I'd say, sorry, you're right. I'd say Congo, Tunisia, Ghana, Ivory Coast. That'll be the last 4, I reckon.
Yeah, I mean, you saw how good Algeria were at the World Cup, so don't count them out whatsoever,
I just think Ivory Coast will beat them, but they just seem to be... You know how Spain used to be? Good, very good all the time, but just criminally unlucky.
Yeah, I mean, same with the Dutch in the 70s and the Hungarians in the 50s. Quite often recognised as the best team in the tournament, but just didn't get the look. And that's the thing with tournament football. Quite often, it will come down to one game, and that's it. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the winner of the Ivory Coast Algeria game goes on to win it. And in some breaking news, Congo have scored against the Democratic Republic of Congo in that game just 5 minutes ago. So that's looks like it's swinging in Congo's favour.
So obviously, whilst stars like Yaya Toure are out there, slogging it out, and his brother Kolo for a lesser extent, the Premier League has lost a little bit of its star power, but it's still as crazy as ever in its absence. I mean, we're recording now on the 31st of January, so we are a few short minutes away from the Chelsea-Man City game, which have a lot of weight behind it. And it's a game where, while City don't have Toure, Chelsea don't have Costa. So, I mean, 2 big misses there. I mean, City can't do anything about Toure. I mean, that's what the African Cup of Nations is. But Costa kind of got himself out of trouble, into this situation.
Yeah, I was going to say, just quickly, actually, because Senegal have been knocked out, Papi Cissé actually played today for Newcastle. So, Manchester City and a few other clubs would have been praying that their players' teams get knocked out early so they can get their players back in time, but it wasn't to be. But, as you say, Costa, obviously, he's not, he apparently comes from 2 different continents, but one of them's not Africa. He's only got himself to blame. So yeah, I mean, why don't you take us through what happened then, Simon? Well,
he seemed to get himself... Well, we all know him as like a combative player. That's just who he is. But he seems to be...
a bit.
Yeah. But he seemed to commit a bit of get himself into a bit of trouble and lay down a stamp in the League Cup semi-final. And he got himself, obviously, the standard 3-game ban for violent conduct. But you just you got to think, from Costa's perspective, I reckon he's one of those people that winds up players to get into the defenders' heads and get past them easy and score goals.
Yeah, but that's what Ian Wright used to do. He said he would annoy them, he would get underneath their skin, so they're thinking about that rather than thinking about the game. That's what he loved doing. So Costa definitely does that. The psychological part of the game is huge for him.
But the trouble is, he's lost his cool and he's got too involved in it, and that's obviously cost him now, and it's cost Chelsea with... Obviously, they're missing him for this game, but the other games he's going to miss as well. I mean, his goals have kept them up, kept them firing and kept them going. They'll do well without him, but they'd have wanted him about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, thankfully after today's game, the next away at Aston Villa, so they're not going to be needing him there. And obviously nice to have him, but not an essential. And then the game after this is Everton at home, so this is the big one that he's missing, to say the least. I mean, it would have been true near enough no matter who the other fixtures were. But they've got lucky in the fact that he's only missing this one. It's like decent sized game. He's not missing several.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we've seen him in 5-a-side when we were playing. There's always that one player. Perhaps he fancies himself a little bit too much. Perhaps he's like a little bit aggressive and meaty, but they just seem to like the wind-up merchant side of the game, and it just really like
It
they
reminds
just seem
me.
satisfied, like to be too satisfied by it, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about that. I played a very bad-tempered 7-a-side game on Tuesday night. The C word was thrown about liberally, and the referee didn't seem to know what day it was, let alone the rules of the game. In fact, he asked me the rules of the game before we started. So, yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, and it's interesting as well that Pellegrini's come out earlier today, and he basically said that Costa's got to tone down his aggression. Obviously, that's a rival manager saying that. It'd be different if Mourinho was saying that about his own player. Mourinho claimed it was accidental, but it is true that while having that side to your game can be an advantage, if you do take it too far and you let them get under your skin, then the pendulum swings too far and you're actually a liability.
It's comparable with diving in a way. If you get known as a diver, it gets exponentially harder for you to win fouls. If you get known as a wind-up merchant, it might be harder for you to get opponents sent off for legitimate tackles, but B, fouls against you might subconsciously count for more in the referee's eyes. Of course, they're not going to make a conscious effort to do it, but we've all suggested it, we've all supposed it, we've all seen media campaigns highlighting it. Divers tend to not win penalties for a while after diving. And
if you get a reputation, it becomes a lot more difficult, yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, I'm not suggesting that any referee would consciously do that by any stretch of the imagination, but do you think it's the same thing in that sense? Do you reckon his reputation might count against him one day?
Mm-hmm.
So...
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole stamping thing, do you reckon it should just be the standard 3 games, or do you reckon there should be more to it than that?
I would say 3 games, yes. Obviously, this shouldn't really be that important, but it is the fact that it's this 3 games as well. It's the Manchester City game, which is going to be a big one. I think because of that, Mourinho is going to wrap him across the knuckles, and it might change. It might tell him to, it might give him a bit of a shock and make him sort himself out. It won't necessarily, but it might do. So,
there's the potential for it, but I reckon he'll calm down for a little bit, but it'll slowly creep back into his game again. He just seems like that kind of player.
Yeah.
I mean, great record. I imagine many fantasy football players dropped him like a stone when the news came out, but as soon as his game ban's been served, I imagine he might creep back in straight away. And I can't fault the man in terms of his on the field ability. He is a great player to watch, and a few people said at the start of the season, I don't know if one of us was one of them, but that he might struggle and it might take him a season 2 to get firing, but he is phenomenal.
He's come out of nowhere. Not come out of nowhere, but sorry, I mean, he's hit the ground running, he really has. I think it's 17 goals so far, so obviously we knew he was good, but we weren't sure how well he'd adapt. But obviously he's taken to it like a duck to water.
I mean, another player that seems to be taking to the Premier League like a duck to water and tearing it up, and is Harry Kane, who's notched another 2 today at least. Mm-hmm. It might be more than that, I haven't checked, but he was at least 2 before we started recording. So, what are your thoughts on Harry Kane? I mean, Kane, great player, the age-old tradition of whenever every young English player does well, has warranted, of course, that we have heard the England call-up requests for him. Do you think he'd get into the squad now? Is he worth a look?
I'd say he'd be worth a look, definitely, because he's he's in great form. He's young, and I think it'd be a good idea to give him a bit of a go. I mean, obviously Charlie Austin as well is equally in good form at the moment. So Well, I think they should both be pushing for a run, and it also puts a bit more pressure
Mm.
on the tradition, because at the moment it seems to be when not injured, Rooney and Sturridge that are getting the nods, and to a certain extent Welbeck as well. So definitely, it's a good idea to introduce, um, in at least in the minds of their rivals, the idea that these young players are coming through and they're going to be getting games.
I'd
Um,
like to see, in terms of like just suggesting potential upfronts, I'd love to see a Kane and Sturridge partnership, because Kane's got the energy and Sturridge has got the placement and like the pace. Same with like Kane and Austin. I think those two together, that'd be an interesting combination to say the least.
Yeah, you want a couple of players whose games dovetail quite well. That's why I think Welbeck and Sturridge don't tend to play together that well. Not that they have very often, but I think they're similar players. Similar. Sturridge is, in my opinion, the better player, but yeah, you don't want two players who play in a very similar way.
Mm. You don't set up an FM team with two poachers, and it's the
No,
same principle here.
yeah, I've actually heard of some people who do, but they're wild and dangerous mavericks, so I don't see much. But just quickly as well, I am keeping you up to date. It's 2-1 to the Congo. Dora scored on 55 minutes, and Bafumi Kalusa notched a second on 62, and then just 3 minutes later, Mbakani Bueza pulled one back for the Democratic Republic of Congo. So yeah, 3 goals in 10 minutes and 21 minutes to go. So that one's chugging along nicely. But yeah, as you were saying, Harry Kane, I've been very impressed with him this season, as has everyone, and you could argue that him and Ericsson are really carrying the team. The Spurs in general have been poor this season, poor form, I'd say. They're very erratic, losing games, drawing lots of games.
You say poor, but they are fifth. That's about where you'd expect Spurs to be.
Yeah, but I mean, having some of their play, at times they've been playing like relegation candidates. At times they've been playing like a championship winning team.
When they dismantled Chelsea, for example, recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, I know what you mean. They are very Jekyll and Hyde, but in terms of league position, I think they're about where we would place them. I mean, the only aberration in the top 5 is the fact that Southampton are there, which is making your £10 bet look more and more foolish by the day.
Yeah, I mean, Southampton are doing really well. I'm actually quite happy to see it. But yeah, it is. I mean, the league's a bit strange this year. I mean, Everton usually are right up there and they're lower down. Villa are usually doing better than this. And QPR have been terrible again. Lost again today. Jonathan Walters scored a perfect hat-trick, scoring one in the 90th minute. So now QPR have lost all 11 away games. If it carries on going the way it is, they could be the first team to, well, actually no, I think there's been 1 or 2 teams that have gone through the Premier League without winning an away game. But yeah, I mean, the Premier League it's been an interesting one this year, really, hasn't it?
It's opened up a little bit. I mean, we've seen Liverpool splutter at the start. We've seen Tottenham, as you say, have very eclectic form. Arsenal stumbled out the blocks really as well. You'd say if it wasn't for Alexis Sanchez, having Alexis Sanchez, some games they'd have dropped even more points. So it's certainly not the standard. I mean, Man United, everyone laughed at their struggles at the start, but they seem to have stabilised now. They're up to 5th. I mean, at the moment, they're 9 points off the top spot, with the top spot still to play today. So, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. There's 15 games, 9 points in 15 games. It's doable, mathematically. So, trouble is, though, I think we've met all but 2 teams you don't know who you're really going to get. Whereas Chelsea and Man City, you always seem to know what you're going to get. I mean, there's one time, I think, this year, in the Premier League at least, where we've been caught off guard, and that was Tottenham beating Chelsea. when it comes to those two teams. And it's that kind of consistency which has like really awarded them.
Yeah.
And I think that just shows in the fact that they're the top two teams in the league at the moment.
Definitely. You know, basically what I was just having a quick look at some of the facts and stats that are going on at the moment as well. Just as a little aside, but if Aston Villa carry on going the way they do, they'll have scored less goals this season than Derby did in their shameful season where they got 11 points, was it?
It was 11, yeah, that's the record at the moment. I mean, that's the record that's safe for another season, but you'd think a team scoring as few goals as Villa would be like challenging for that shameful record.
They've just managed to draw some games and managed to score a meagre amount of goals in the right games, And they might have only got 11, but they scored them when they needed to. They got some good wins in there.
Yeah. I mean, they just look so flat. I mean, we've just seen Aston Villa steadily decline over the last few years. The term relegation, you could easily attach it to them. They're only 3 points off the drop zone, and if at your goal scoring rates, it's not survival amounts, it's not survival levels.
No, personally, I would like to see them be relegated. I think it might be what they need. Obviously, I'm not the biggest fan of Aston Villa. Most people know this. I'm not the biggest fan of Paul Lambert because I don't think he's a particularly good manager. So, I'd be interested to see them get relegated and how they react to that.
Yeah. Oh, it's certainly going to be an interesting one if they do go down. Same with Everton. I mean, Martinez admitted today that they're in a relegation fight. Like, if they... And Soccer Saturday today were talking about whether or not they're too good to go down. Charlie Nicholas rightly pointed out there's no such thing. Like, the quality of your squad doesn't guarantee your position at all, it's how they actually play. So, I mean, do you think they'll go down? Like, it'd be it'd be an interesting one, especially considering you've got a £28 million striker and you get relegated.
I would say it's unlikely, because of the other teams that are around there. I would say, in general, obviously this kind of season should be a wake-up call, but I think they're going to stay up just because the quality of some of the other teams around them are so poor. So that's what's going to save them more than anything.
Yes. Well, time will tell. Maybe there'll also be some hot signings between now and Monday that'll change the game completely. I'm sure we'll have a little bit of a roundup of the action, how limited as it has been of the transfer window. We'll have a look at it on our next edition when it's closed. But time will tell with the Premier League. Time will tell indeed. But speaking of transfers, now transfers were obviously a key cornerstone on many football games, as well as obviously football itself. But sometimes they can be used and abused. We were just talking about this earlier, just kicking this old theme around. And me and Tom were just talking about the whole concept of cheating at football games. Like, well, what's unethical and what's just plain cheating? It's a really interesting one we came up with, I think. Like, if it's 1-1 in like a tournament final between you and your mates, and you've got the opportunity, would you pass across the box? Or does that cheapen it in some way? Does that feel wrong? What are your thoughts?
I wouldn't say that cheapens it. In certain games you got to win, and win by any means. So if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. Other forms of ethical flexibility would be a little bit more. I would have a problem with, but something like that I'd be fine with. I've done it myself, so.
I can't remember doing it, and I don't even see the opportunity anymore because you just get. It's not liked activity. Like, it's not the done thing, so I just don't even see the opportunities anymore. It's sort of been wired out of my brain, like as learned behaviour. But like, one of those. It's like you just. It's like when. Like it's like taking over an established team on Football Manager. Like taking over United. It's like, oh yeah, you've got a big budget. Well done, you. You know. And it's like, oh, I won the Premier League. Okay, first season, yeah, you won the Premier League. If it was the first season with Sunderland and you won the Premier League, that means more. But that's not cheating. But it's got a bad rep taking over established teams on FM. So I won't go as far as saying unethical, but do you think there's a bit of inverse snobbery? It's more inverse snobbery with Football Manager and that aspect of Football Manager, do you think?
Yeah, I'd say that would be the best way of describing it. Football Manager is a bit different, but yeah, I mean, with Football Manager as well, the amount of control you have over it is very different to, say, something like Pro Evo and FIFA. So I think there's more. Especially amongst the Football Manager community, I feel there's a much more of an ethical sort of. There's ethical guidelines talked about much more often.
It's weird because there's an editor on Football Manager, so you can give yourself money and you can give yourself the big ones. It's used to do certain challenges. But I think when it's used for those challenges, it's fine. Like there's one where you start off like as a team with no players in like the lowest level of English football, but they give you a 500 million budget, and you've got to build an empire from that low level, but you've got the low reputation but the money. That's a fascinating challenge. So having the money on that challenge isn't cheating. But if you'd given it to yourself, say if you were Forest Green Rovers. More on them later. And you gave yourself a big budget in the editor, that's cheating. But that isn't. So there's a myriad of sub-clauses, I think, within Football Manager. In terms of what sometimes is cheating and what isn't. I think conclusively what we can agree is cheating is adding another manager and getting them to bid for your players. That we definitively know that's wrong. And obviously, like, you know, if a game doesn't go your way, going back to it and playing it and playing it and playing it and playing it. But even then, like, people who have, like, terrible laptops will justify it by saying, well, if the laptop crashes and they won the game and then it crashes just afterwards, they will go back and play that game until they win because, in their eyes, that's the win they should have had.
That's happened to me a few times. You know, I was having problems with my laptop charger and it was just turning off. So there's been a few games that I've had to replay, but I always kept the result regardless of how I did before. I always put the same team out because obviously if you win 3-0 with a team, you don't want to replay it and then lose. I don't think I've ever actually won and then lost. I've won and then drawn, which was tough. I think I won 3 or 4-0 and then ended up losing. But yeah. Oh, and what a game! The Democratic Republic of Congo, from being 2-0 down, equalised on 75 minutes. And now Kimwaki has scored on 81. So it's now 3-2 to Congo DR, Dr. Congo, as they like to be known. So there's been, in 30, let me work this out. No, in 26 minutes, there's been 5 goals. And Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, have scored in 26 minutes. Where's that? Work this out. It's embarrassing. In 16 minutes, they've scored 3 goals. In 16 minutes, they may have saved themselves from being put out
and knocked out their bigger neighbours.
Yeah, and knocked out their huge rivals. You know, how many other countries in the world share a name? You know, not many, I'm sure. So this is huge.
Well, Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland share the island bit, if you want to get pedantic. And United Kingdom and United States. But I know what you mean.
I'm not talking about the United bit. I'm talking about the most important bit, which is the actual, you know,
the main bit of the name. I know what you're saying. Yeah. I think some of our American fans might roast us for that one as well.
It won't be the first time we've been roasted by an American. But, yeah, I mean, actually, Democratic Republic of Congo is bigger. But yeah, it has got a quite quite a big rivalry with Congo. So it's really interesting what's going on right now.
But to get back to cheating at video games, have you ever been a victim of it yourself? Like, has someone ever done something to you, like made you feel that you were cheated playing against someone at a football video game?
We've all been FM'd, which is basically a nice way of saying that FM Football Manager has cheated you when you've played really well, should have won the game, had more shots on target, more possession. But you just end up losing it.
But that's football. That happens on all football games.
No, I agree. I was just...
You blame the game, but it's not the game. It is football. That's how it is sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, and personally, I don't play that much online against other people. So I don't really have that much. I mean, but I've been playing in games where I've thought, well, actually, that's a little bit, as you were saying, like with players who don't maybe tend to have the same morality, players who will do different things. Personally, I would, if passed the ball by the keeper accidentally, I would pass it back to him rather than score. That's an example. So,
see, I wouldn't do that.
Well, it depends who I was playing against, but
no, I mean anyone. As a general, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't pass across the box, but I would do that. I wouldn't give the ball back in that situation. So there's a difference right there in terms of what we find acceptable. I've done it. Well, I've not consciously done it, but there was a great example of a game I was playing on FIFA Ultimate Team the other day. I basically got smacked about for 80 minutes. They took like an early 1-0 lead, and I got an equaliser. Which it was a decent goal. Like nothing scrappy about it. And then with my second shot on target in the 85th minute, I scored the winner. And it's one of those where like I'm happy, but I kind of feel sorry for my opponent. Like you feel awkward for the way you've won. So even it's not cheating because I didn't break any rules, but compared to if I'd beaten him 2-1 and played well and dominated the game, it didn't feel quite as good, quite as right, if that makes sense.
I know what you mean. It's simple, and you sort of you aim for one pocket, it bounces off, clips the edges, and bounces off the rim, and you end up in the pocket. You apologise because it's not what you've intended. And some people do that, some people don't. Personally,
I do that if I'm playing in the same room as someone. I do that, but because I don't wear a headset when I play, I feel like it. But because you're not really communicating, even though it's a person, you still feel a bit. But you don't, because I don't have that communication channel with them. I don't do it, but that's only because I don't have the headset on.
They're all just meat puppets to you, really, aren't they?
Just faceless drones in my personal theatre of entertainment.
Insight into the mind of Simon Hunt. I understand. But I think what we can take from this is that there are blurred lines in when it comes to this, and it's down to each person's individual morality.
I mean, yeah, it's luck of the draw. I think is the common theme of the podcast. It's luck of the draw whether or not you'll still be in a professional tournament. It's luck of the draw whether or not you'll get someone that thinks passing across the box is acceptable or not. So it's one of those things. You can't control who you get, and you can't control whether or not your ball will come out before the other bag.
Mm-hmm.
So one person whose luck hasn't run out necessarily, but he seems to have fallen a bit more of hard times, is our forgotten footballer this week. Who have we got lined up, Tom?
Well, he's big, he's round, he's worth about £50. It's big fat footballer, forgotten footballer, John Parkin, who's now plying his trade down at Forest Green Rovers in the Conference North. And
they scored today against our beloved Nuneaton Town.
Yeah, he scored the only goal in a 1-0 win at home for them. So, yeah, I mean, they're not doing too well at the moment, so that's going to hurt. But John Parkin, for those who don't immediately know the name, John Parkin's actually, he's played a higher level of football, and a good quality striker, for Conference North. One thing you've got to remember as well is, while he is famous for being quite fat, he's not obese, but he's got a hell of a belly on him, I'd say that. And he is a big guy. I mean, he's 6'5", so.
I think the term you'd use is portly.
Yes. He's certainly a unit, put it that way. Yeah. 33 now, so, and he is beginning to show his age. He was never that quick, so that's not slowing him down. And in terms of aerial ability, he's very strong. So it's not surprising that he won at that level. But he was playing for Cardiff only 3 years ago, he had a lot of time at Preston as well. Stoke. But yeah, it's probably Cardiff and Preston that most people know him from. He was down in League Two playing for Fleetwood, which is fair enough, about his level. Had a reasonable return there, but now he's at Forest Green Rovers. His record's nearly 1-2, so obviously he's still got it.
Well, it's nice when he's found his level and he's better than, and he's playing at the conference level, not Conference North. It's just the one above. Sorry to be that guy, because the Neaton, I'd just like to point out the Neaton are still in the conference for the time being, although probably not much longer. But hopefully. But he's one of those guys who you always saw in FM if you were like a League 1 or 2 club and thought, you know what, he'd do a job. Mm-hmm. He's one of those guys that whenever you're like on the video printer, you're like, oh, that's where he is now. He's famous and he's not famous simultaneously. Well, he's known, is what he is. He's a known player.
Yeah, but I mean, it would surprise me when I saw the name Parkin on the score sheet against Nuneaton. I did have to check, and then lo and behold, there he was. But we should also point out as well that Coventry, of course, went in for him. In fact, I think we had a bid accepted. He came for medical and to discuss personal terms, but unfortunately, it was on deadline day, and he failed his medical. I'm not quite sure why. So, and because it was on deadline day, they had to, we had to scrap it. If there was a problem with the medical that could have been sorted, within a week or whatever, then it would have been fine. But because he was, because of the situation, because it was on deadline day, it never happened.
It's further proof you shouldn't leave your shopping to the last minute as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think he was demanding at least $9,000 a week as well, which is a lot of money for him, considering he's not, he's known as a decent goal scorer, but not that prolific. I mean,
well, his overall record's not fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the various different clubs he's had, I mean, he started in '98, so he's been around for a long time. And if you add up all the games, you're probably going to get something along the lines of 1 in 4, 1 in 5, maybe. Because he's had some very good periods, like at Macclesfield, where he got 30 in 65. But then there's also been times where he's really struggled for goals, like at Stoke, where he only scored 2 in 29. So his league record is not great, very much a lower league player. Couldn't really cut it in the Championship, it's fair to say.
He's, I think the longest spell of his career is Preston. He had a good 3 years there, and it's like 28 goals in 100 games, which it's not like world beating form, to say the least. But he's one of those that you could, as I say, you could always rely on.
Yeah, he'll do a job for you. He's a big Barnsley lad. He's strong, as I say, 6'4", good in the air. He's not necessarily just there to score goals, but
he's like a bloke that you could tell growing up. He was put up front because he was 6'4", and he just happened to be good at it. I reckon his height. I reckon he was a big kid, and they reckon we'll put him up front, and that's when they discovered he was good. They didn't discover he was good and then put him up front, if you see what I mean.
Kind of. I hope so. Yeah, I mean, what I'd say as well about him is that you know, as a player, he's probably going to be remembered more for his weight, known as the Beast, feed the Beast and he will score. He's probably going to be known for that more than his another aspect of his career. A bit of a journeyman these days. He's had probably about 15 clubs if you include loans. So he's only 33. He could go on for another 4 or 5 years.
Well, at that level, yeah, he's got plenty of gas left in the tank, but he's one of those which I think we'll keep seeing on FM like 16, 17, and if you like Dover or Wellingborough or someone like that, you'll still be taking looks at him.
Definitely, very good for the for Forest Green Rovers level. So a good sign of them. I just wonder how much money he's on.
I can't imagine it's like the $9,000 that you were quoting earlier for Coventry.
Yeah, I mean that was a few years.
That was a few years ago. So yeah,
a few leagues above. So.
That's true. So, John Parkin, there you have it. Big unit of a man.
Big unit of man. Forgotten perhaps, but not forgotten for good, because we still remember him. And we've got to say congratulations for his goals today, and hopefully he does well for them, because they're not a bad side, and I do like to see him do well. So yeah, that's our forgotten footballer. And I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our coverage. But as ever, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we shall return. So it's goodbye from me, Mr. Tom Patrick.
That's goodbye from me, Mr. Simon Cross.
I hope you enjoy this episode of Mid-Table Crisis, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
Have a good one, listeners. Bye-bye.